Morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Alaska Center for Spiritual Living. Thank you for coming out on this beautiful Mother's Day. Thank you for those that are here today, and we also welcome those that are watching on YouTube. It was World War II. As a soldier, it was in the Pacific Theater, island hopping as the Americans were reclaiming lands lost to the Japanese, and this young soldier heard something right next to him, loud, "Duck, James, duck!" And it was his mother's voice right next to it, and the startle. Because it was his mother and it was loud and it was right next to him, he just instinctively ducked. And at that moment, a bullet went right where his head had been. And his mother was receiving treatment for cancer back in Baltimore, Maryland, on the other side of the earth. A young lady was having some troubles. She had a guy, she really liked him a lot, but there were some red flags, and she didn't know quite what to do in this relationship. And she wasn't sure. And one night, as she slept, someone shook her leg, her ankle, and woke her up out of a deep sleep. And there at the foot of her bed was her mother, who had passed away 5 years earlier. And her mother said, "Dump him now. Get out of this relationship. Get out." And then there was a young boy. He had lost his mother as a baby, but he had a dream. And in this dream, a brown-haired, curly-haired, blue-eyed young lady came to him. And this same brown-haired, blue-eyed lady came to him often throughout his developing years. She gave him comfort. She gave him advice. She helped him out numerous times. Many years later, he met his father, and his father was showing him some pictures, and in one of the pictures that his father showed him was that very blue-eyed, brown curly-haired woman. And he said, "Who's that?" And the father drew back and said, "You didn't know? That's your mother." These type of stories of mother connection abound. It's very difficult for us to put our scientific calipers on it and measure these things, but the stories themselves are numerous and they are powerful. The title of my talk today is A Calm Mother's Day, which is just another example of why it's difficult to get the title and the theme of the talk out by Tuesday, because sometimes it changes between Tuesday and there. My 3 points are the storm of conflict, the mother connection, and the miracle of motherly love. But we'll start off with the storm of conflict. I've said this before, and I think all of you would agree with me that life is messy. And it's messy for all of us. Nobody is exempt. Nobody goes through this without having opportunities to grow and learn. We can look at this as life's storms, and the conditions for the storm of conflict are always present. I lump these together into what I call the 4 winds that support the storm of conflict. I had to have 4 things because there's 4 directions. Some of these kind of overlap and bleed a little bit, but you'll get what I'm after. First of all is the wind of the sense of separation. Most of us were not told when we were little that we are perfect children of God. We were all told something much different than that. And in that, we learn to separate ourselves from experiences and from others and from God, from that divine creative force. It's safer to be away. Wind number 2 is the wind of misperception. I think there is a Hebrew phrase, I think this is in the Talmud, we see things not as they are, but as we are. It was repeated at teen camp years and years ago. Picked it up and the teens said, what you're looking at, you're looking with. And of course we all know the adage, what comes around goes around. So misperception, we don't accurately see what's around us. The third wind is the wind of competition. I think that this wind of competition comes from a sense of lack and limitation. It comes from a feeling that there's not enough and that I better get in and elbow my way in and take it before somebody else gets it because there's not enough to go around for everybody. The last wind is the wind of defensiveness. In this, we perceive others as adversaries, that somebody is against us for whatever reason. It could be somebody we don't even know what it is. We are separate from everything and everybody. So these are the winds of the storm of conflict. We also have to stir into this our attitude. Our attitude has so much to do with all of it. I remember a fishing trip I went on with several guys. Boy, this must be back in the 70s. We went to Yakutat, southeast Alaska in the spring. And sometimes it can rain in southeast Alaska. And I'll tell you, it was miserable. It was raining when we landed in Yakutat, and it didn't stop. And my dad and one of the other guys managed to somehow fall in the Seatuck River the first day. I mean, they were wet. Everything was wet. The tents were wet. Sleeping bags are wet. It just miserable. But the one guy that we were with, he had this just incredible attitude. And, you know, another squall had come over and the rain's beating down on you. You know, my Uncle Ed, he used to tell me the fish always bite when the rains come. And no matter what happened, you know, Uncle Ed used to tell me that right after the rain quits, the fishing really picks up. He had an attitude that for anything, Uncle Ed said the fishing's going to get good now. Gary Simmons, he wrote a book, it's called The Eye of the Storm, tells a story in there about when he was younger, he was quite the bicycle. He loved bicycling and whatnot, and he was out for a ride with one of his riding partners one day, and they came over, and there was a big hill, and he loved the challenge of a big hill. He could drop down the gears and really get into it. I guess he thought he was Lance Armstrong or something, but he loved the hills, and his thought was, oh, good, a hill. His partner came around and saw that and said, oh, God, a hill. And it's the attitude. How we approach it has so much to do with what we experience. Now, a lot of today's talk is about mothers and the loving nature of mothers and the nurturing side of mothers and whatnot. So as I looked things up on this, I came across something that I think is almost better. And this is things that mothers report having learned from their kids. And these are some really revealing things. Jenna, you probably can share some of these. I don't know. Things that I've learned from my children. If you spray hairspray on dust bunnies and then run over them with rollerblades, they can ignite. I never knew that. When you hear the toilet flush and the words, uh-oh, it's already too late. I did not know this. And I'm sure Ann didn't know it either. Brake fluid mixed with Clorox makes smoke, and a lot of it. Play-Doh and microwave should never be used in the same sentence. Super glue is forever. Garbage bags do not make a good parachute. Marbles in gas tanks make lots of noise while driving. See, kids have got so much wisdom. We can learn so much from them. You probably don't want to know what that odor is. And here's a tip. This is a good one. I know this one. Always look in the oven before you turn it on.
Yeah.
The fire department in Austin, Texas has a 5-minute response time. Now, and I'll leave you with this one. These are getting too long. But the spin cycle on a washing machine does not make earthworms dizzy. However, it does make cats dizzy. And did you know that a cat will throw up twice their body weight when dizzy? Okay, point number 2, the mother connection. A guy by the name of David Kessler is a grief expert. He's written a really popular book. He's a well-known author. And he studied people who have been visited by deceased friends and loved ones. And here's a quote. The person who visits the most is your mother. And it's not even close. This was also confirmed by hospice workers who are working with people that are making their transition. The person that visits us most as we make our transition is our mother. Dr. Judith Orloff is a psychiatrist and an author, and she wrote, "Mothers have a strong sixth sense about their kids." And she attributes this to genetics, emotional ties, and the bond created by carrying a baby for 9 months in the womb. But even this does not explain the things like a soldier ducking at just the right moment, or impossible dreams about an unknown mother, or visits from a deceased mother. But this is what's amazing. That same connection can exist in adoptive parents as well. That those same things. So that almost rules out the genetic side of it, and other things can rule out a lot of the things that Judith Orloff postulated in what she offered. I think there's a lot to that, and I think that there is certainly a genetic component to it. It makes sense, but there's something more, and we are just now starting to get our arms around it or get our brains around it and see what this mother connection is. This is not in any books. This is Don's down-home country philosophy. I believe that same connection that mothers have with their kids, adoptive or not, the thing that kids have for their mother, that connection, whatever it is exactly the same connection that the divine current has for us. That as it expresses itself through and as us, whether you say that God created us and we're all God's children, however you phrase that, whatever it is, that connection exists between us and the divine as well. We are those perfect divine children of God, just as our children are perfect, just as they are. Yes, we make mistakes. We've been given free will. What a wonderful thing. And we have the right to experience things that are, our parents aren't so happy to go through. Our parents hate to see us make those choices. But we do, and that's how we grow, and that's how we live. Third point is the miracle of motherly love. We are, each and every one of us, constantly and continuously creating. We are giving birth to the ideas that shape our life. It is our thinking that is creating it, and we are in charge of our thinking. If we want to change the experiences that we have here and now, we can do so by changing how we think. This is a long letter. I'm going to read it. This is delivered by Ernest Holmes on May 13th, just a day away from now, in 1951. It was Mother's Day. And it was part of his Mother's Day address that day. One of the things that has touched me more deeply than usual bears witness to the fact that hope hid in faith can bear the fruit of achievement. This letter, which I want to read to you. And now Ernest Holmes is reading this letter. Dear Dr. Holmes, with all my heart, I owe you this. One dreary, gray Sunday afternoon last autumn, I felt that I had reached a new low in frustration, worry, and despair. My husband, insecure and anxious, had gone to the office to try to make up in time spent what he lacked in ability to produce. Lacking confidence, he had tried 4 times, after 4 years of college and 12 years of night study, to pass the state CPA examination. Some sense of failure, some deep feeling of insecurity, much of it based in his inability to pass the exam, had caught him in a vicious circle of defeat. I sat there idly, racking my brain for some idea, some way that we could take, some method of helping him. Switching on the radio, turning from station to station, when suddenly I heard, well, you know only too well. There is a power for good in this universe, greater than us all. And that's how Ernest Holmes always started his radio broadcast. I listened, comforted at first, relieved, and then suddenly exalted. The late afternoon sun seemed to break through the clouds, warming that October day and streaming into the room. A great feeling broke over me, not so much a realization of something new, but a recognition of something that I had always known, which I had never quite called by its right name. That says it for me. My experience with this philosophy, for this way of living, it's something that I felt that I always knew deep inside of me, but I never had the ability to articulate it, to say it quite right. And Ernest Holmes did that. From then on, I seemed to change, and I hoped that if possible, I could find a way for myself. My husband might also find his way. I started going to your church, and when I could not go, I listened on Sunday afternoons. I began to know that some of the richest happiness any woman could know. When my husband brought home problems, my tongue suddenly found some answers. I prayed that it would begin to feel what I was just beginning to experience. I found that just a word here, a word there, seemed to stick in his mind. I could never just outrightly preach to him. And I began to see the burden lifting from his shoulders. Instead of taking the next examination after several months of financial deprivement, off work for study, he simply walked in with no preparation except what he had already accumulated over the years, and with a, well, what can I lose attitude, and took the test. At work, I spent the day running back and forth from my desk to a quiet spot, praying. Tonight, Dr. Holmes, as I walked in the door of our home, my husband held out a trembling hand, and in it was a paper that said that he had finally passed the state board. And greater than it all, he told me that the first thing that he did when he ripped it from the envelope was to thank God. I cannot help but think of the help that you must be to all of the young people like ourselves, slaves to the age of the high IQ. For you tell them to seek, and ye shall find, and you will help them to find the right place in which to look. Ernest Holmes went on then to say, surely these two people have experienced a new birth, and I have no doubt that the divine intelligence which operated through this man will continue to operate through him. Our thoughts are continually and continuously and forever creating. And if we worry about the test, if we are consumed with whether we're going to pass the test or not, I think sometimes we're just setting ourselves up for failure. When we can just know the truth, that these 12 years of experience, that all the studying that I've already done, the things that have already been accomplished, have already set me up for success, then our chances of passing the test are greatly enhanced. Our thoughts are creative. So as a symbol of the motherly love, as a symbol of that divine creative process, as a symbol of how our thoughts affect who we are and what we do, we have flowers for you, each and every one of you today. For each one of us has that motherly, nurturing, creative side to us. Regardless of our gender, we are all creative mothers. And so for everyone, regardless of your gender, we have a flower for you today. And our choir is going to pass it out at the end of the service. So I invite you to take that flower and remember as a symbol, what a powerful symbol that it represents. My final conclusion today, we're going to go back to David Kessler, the author and grief expert. David Kessler had lost his mother when he was 13. The pain of the experience was made even worse by the fact that when they were notified that she was in the process of making her transition, he and his father rushed to the hospital. It was in New Orleans to be with her, and there had been some type of a shooting at the entrance to the emergency room and area of this hospital, and it was all under police tape and guardians, and they couldn't get in. They couldn't go in, and his mother passed away before he ever got a chance to say goodbye to her. And that may have been what moved him into this field of grief and why he became attached to that and studied it so much. But years and years and years later, he found himself once again in New Orleans, delivered on a speaking engagement, and he found himself downtown in the area where that hospital was. And so he just went for a walk and he found himself approaching the hospital. Well, Hurricane Katrina had just gone through and the hospital was dark. There was like no electricity. There was still water in some of the floors. He went up to that emergency room entrance and everything was the same as it had been all those years ago when he was 13. And he went in and a guard came up and stopped him. And he explained to the guard why he was there and what he was doing. And for some reason, the guard threw all the rules out the window and let him in. And he walked in the door and he remembered right where his mother was. She was, down the hall, second room on the left. And he went in and he went to that room. And as he looked over the bed, which would have been the bed that his mother was in when she passed away, the nurse call light was on and it was blinking green on and off. And that was the signal in that hospital that the patient was being cared for. Now, how that one light worked in that dark hospital with wires hanging through the ceilings and everything else, we don't know. But what David Kessler took out of that was that it was a message from his mother that she was being taken care of. And so I think that connection, that mother connection, continues on in this life and forever. For we are all those magnificent children of God. Maybe we didn't have the perfect mother, but maybe we did. And it was only appearance that was less. Maybe she was exactly the teacher that we needed. So with an awareness of that, motherly love. I invite my colleagues, the practitioners, to join me in holding our congregation in love and light and peace. We just simply know there is a power for good in the universe, and you can use it. And that power is available to each and every one of us at every moment. And even though there is an appearance of lack and limitation, the truth is that we live in an abundant universe. A universe that is so abundant we can't begin to count the stars in the heavens. It'd be like trying to count the grains of sand on a beach. We know that though there's appearance of dis-ease, the truth is that each and every one of us was made perfect exactly as we are. That anything that we classify as dis-ease or an imperfection or something that is wrong with us, whether it's a chronic disease or whether it's an accident or a broken bone, that there is a blueprint within us that is perfect. And our bodies have been given everything that they need to heal, to reveal that absolute perfection. And it is only for us to get out of the way and allow that divine current operate through our bodies as us to make us perfect and whole and complete once again. And finally, we know that even though there can be the appearance of discord, of anger, of distrust, that behind all of that each and every one of us are beloved children of God, that each one of us are perfect just as we are. And we can set aside what we classify as someone else's behavior, someone else's ideas, someone else's thoughts, and we can just release them and let them go. Because we know that the truth is that God is love. And we can see the God within everyone. And so we just give thanks. We give thanks for perfect health. We give thanks for abundance and prosperity. And we give thanks for the love of God. Now we can just let this go, let it be, and so it is. Happy Mother's Day.